Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and these are my running back rankings for Week 5, where the position is gross this week. There are a lot of injuries. We already knew about Christian McCaffrey and Isaiah Pacheco on IR, but now Jonathan Taylor is hurt, and while they are likely not going to put him on IR, they were considering it yesterday. Now it looks like they are no longer thinking about it. That's good news, but he is going to miss some time. I do think he misses at least one game, if not two, maybe even three, and it does look like Trey Sermon will be their RB1 this week. So bad news, if you have Taylor, you probably cannot start him. I did not rank him in this video. I also did not rank Austin Eckler, Raheem Mostert, Jalen Warren, Cordero Patterson, and Tyler Beatty, but none of them were like studs in your lineup in the first place, and they are just questionable. They might play. It is possible, but at least Beatty is out for sure. I did not rank any of them. I also did not rank Nick Chubb in this video, but there is some optimism. His practice window will be opened this week, and that means he'll play over the next 3 weeks. He will make his debut, but I'm not convinced it happens in Week 5, so for the moment, he's not ranked in this video. I'll update these ranks on Saturday. If we do find out he's practicing and will play, I will rank him later on in the week. But I also did not rank Jonathan Brooks, who sounds unlikely to be activated for practice. Unlike Nick Chubb, it might take a little bit longer for Jonathan Brooks. But there's also 4 teams on bye and some really important running backs for your lineup. Saquon Barkley is on bye. Same with Kenny Gainwell of the Eagles. Jahmyr Gibbs and Dave Montgomery, 2 top 10 running backs, also on bye. You can't start them. Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears with some flex appeal on the bench. They're on bye this week as well. And then J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards on bye. None of these guys on the screen can be started. They are all not ranked in this video. So it is ugly. It gets pretty thin. Once we get past like RB15, you do feel kind of desperate already. So let's begin at the top, where Derrick Henry has earned your respect at this point. He's still such a dominant force in the league. He gets the Bengals this week, and he has looked unstoppable over the last 2 games. Just an absolute juggernaut in the backfield. The combination of him and Lamar is such a nightmare, and it feels inevitable that one of the two is going to be breaking a massive run every single week. So love Derrick Henry. There's no way you're benching him. He had over 200 yards, 2 touchdowns last week, and he could do it again against Cincinnati. I'm a little bit worried he might not be 100% for the playoffs at this rate, but at least for now, you got to show him the respect he's earned. He is still elite. He looks like the RB1 at the moment. Number 2, though, I have Kenneth Walker versus the Giants, and damn, I was so impressed with Walker on Monday night. Detroit looks like an elite run defense. They've been one of the best since last year, and he lit them up. Only 12 rush attempts on the game, but turned it into 80 yards, 6.7 yards per carry. He also scored 3 rushing touchdowns, and the play where he didn't get fully tackled, he spun around and used leverage to flip himself over the defender, pick up another 5+ yards. That was so insane. He looks like an absolute stud, and I don't think anyone can stop him. He's also fully rested, coming off 2 weeks when he was banged up, and he looks like one of the league's top 5 running backs moving forward. When healthy, there is no chance you are benching Walker after last week's performance. So I think he's going to absolutely dominate the Giants in Week 5. I think he's a true stud right now, and I think the lowest I could rank him would be like RB3. But this week at number 2, he is fantastic. Number 3, though, I got Jordan Mason versus the Arizona Cardinals, and this is a top 5 matchup in fantasy at the moment. The Cardinals defense is allowing 26.7 points per game to running backs, 125 yards on the ground per game, 32 receiving yards per game, and 6 running back touchdowns. They just gave up 2 rushing touchdowns to Jeremy McNichols behind Brian Robinson's touchdown as well. So this is definitely a plus matchup. The Cardinals defense cannot really stop anyone, and Mason started to also get going in the passing game for once, and that was the last piece of the puzzle for him. While it wasn't like elite usage, only 3 targets, 2 catches, I was waiting for that for him to be fully unlocked. So that is great news for him. He's clearly the workhorse in this offense, and I think he'll remain the guy for at least a couple more months. Christian McCaffrey now has tendonitis in both of his Achilles tendons, and I genuinely think they might just save him for the playoffs entirely. We might not see McCaffrey on the field until after Christmas. So Jordan Mason is a league winner this year, and I think they're going to be riding him all season long. They will keep him as the number 1 guy as long as possible with McCaffrey on IR. Number 4, though, I have Alvin Kamara at the Chiefs, and I am a little bit worried about this matchup. The Chiefs are the worst fantasy matchup you can ask for a running back so far. They only allow 13.1 points per game to the running back position. 57 yards per game on the ground, 29 receiving yards per game as well. So not likely he goes over 100 yards based on the matchup stats, but they have given up 2 touchdowns to the position. So that's what you're hoping for. I think at this point, though, Alvin Kamara looks matchup proof. Despite a decent downgrade, I am still ranking him top 5. I think he's earned your trust at this point. There's just too much usage going his way. The injury that he has is a little concerning, but according to him, it's not at all. He is not going to miss any time. He's their best weapon by far, and I don't think anyone's benching Kamara after his start to the season. Number 5, though, I have Kyren Williams versus the Packers, and the Rams can't do much outside of him on offense. But when it comes to his fantasy value, who cares? Another 23 touches in week 4. 4 catches, 104 yards, and a touchdown. He's locked into your lineup right now, and there are literally no concerns at all regarding Blake Corum. That keeps his floor extremely safe because there is no committee to worry about. So he's still producing despite being the clear focal point of the opposing defense, and you really have no concerns. Once the wide receivers get healthy, this offense will look a lot better, and he could score multiple touchdowns every week. Kyren Williams has returned the pre-draft value we were expecting. Number 6, though, I got Bijan Robinson versus Tampa, who is questionable, was limited in practice on Tuesday in the walkthrough with a hamstring injury. So they play on Thursday. It's not ideal, but I'm not too worried about it. I do think he'll suit up. I think they're just being cautious. But he did have a weird game in week 4, not much volume, only 7 rushes. He did catch all 4 targets, thankfully, but again, he did not find the end zone for the 3rd game this season. And I think we're in store for a similar performance on Thursday night. I'm not convinced he'll be elite. This is a matchup where I think he can bounce back, but only because the Bucs are vulnerable to running backs in the passing game. They average 6.5 running back receptions per game for 61 receiving yards per game allowed, and that is the only saving grace for this matchup. So I'm worried about Bijan's role in the run game. Tyler Algier is involved, and if you look at his usage last year, it was not very encouraging. One of those games was the migraine game where he only had 1 touch, so you can kind of just throw that out. I don't expect that this week. But in week 14, he only ran for 3.4 yards per carry on 10 rush attempts. He also scored a touchdown, though. He also had 5 catches for 54 yards and a total 16.9 half PPR points. That is legit. So that's what you're hoping for. The touchdown is needed, though, to bail you out. And without it, you might only get 10 or so points. A lot of it this week, I think, will come in the passing game. So more PPR value, but I'm a little bit worried. He's only averaging 12.4 half PPR points per game, and that is definitely not what you anticipated when you drafted him entering the year. But only 1 touchdown as well. The floor is safe for double digits, and I still think no matter what, you have to start him in your lineup if you drafted Bijan, but you are a little disappointed at this point. And after last week, you have to be a bit disappointed in Breece Hall as well. He's my RB7 this week on the road at Minnesota in London. This matchup does rank bottom 4. The Vikings defense is only allowing 14.5 points per game to the position. So not great. They only allow 62 rushing yards per game, 29 receiving yards per game, and only 2 running back touchdowns so far. So really kind of a toss-up whether or not he finds the end zone, and it's just not an ideal spot against arguably the league's best defense this season. So that combined with the dud he put up against Denver last week is just really not ideal. I am downgrading him. He's no longer top 5, at least this week. I'm not expecting a blow-up game from Breece, but definitely still a starter. I don't think you're ever benching him. He's a must-start candidate, and we drafted him top 3 for a reason. So I do expect a slight bounce back, but maybe not like 25 points here. It was really shocking that he was so bad against Denver. He had owned them the previous 2 years. So I'm not going to panic, but it is a red flag. And with a bad matchup here, I am ranking him lower than normal at RB7. I'm not convinced he's a stud this week. Number 8, though, a player that looks like a true stud and alpha on his team. I have Chuba Hubbard at Chicago, and I know we didn't draft him expecting this type of value, but holy shit, he has been phenomenal with Dalton at quarterback. The last 2 games, he's averaging 22.8 half PPR points per game. He is winning you the week. On 24 touches per game, the volume is elite. 4.5 catches per game, 145 total yards per game, and 2 touchdowns over the last 2 games. He is giving you what you expected from guys like Breece Hall and Bijan, at least when Dalton is the quarterback. So while Jonathan Brooks remains on IR, you cannot bench him. I think there's a massive upgrade here as well. The Bears' run defense has been bad this season, allowing 4.6 yards per carry and also 5 rushing touchdowns so far this year. 3 of them were against Kyren Williams. So some high upside for Chuba, while Miles Sanders is involved a little bit, nowhere near enough to threaten his value. And I think he's a must start no matter what this week, even if Brooks were to play. I'm not expecting that, but if it does happen, I don't think I'm bumping down Hubbard below RB15. He's just played so well. I don't think they're going to give Brooks a lion's share of touches right away. They will be ramping him up slowly, and Hubbard in a contract season will have a role all year long. I think Hubbard is a very, very good piece at running back right now. So you have to start him. He's just been so good the last 2 games, and at RB8, he is a lock in your lineup. Number 9, I have James Cook at the Texans, and I do not expect Buffalo to look as bad as they did versus the Ravens ever again this season. I think that was their low point, definitely more of a fluke type of matchup, and I really have no worries about the Bills' offense moving forward. I'm not panicking at all. Kupp has been one of the most consistent pieces of their offense, and they can hang 40 points any week. I think he will get back on track in a potential shootout here against the Texans. It could turn into a very high-scoring game, and I think he's earned must-start status ever since that 3-touchdown game against Miami. I don't think anyone is benching James Cook. You're just rolling with the punches. If he has a bad game, you can tolerate it, but odds are he finds the end zone. He scored 4 this season. Number 10, I have Brian Robinson Jr. versus Cleveland, and as long as Eckler remains out, then B-Rob is a must start. Cleveland has been a pretty average fantasy matchup so far, so there's no downgrade or upgrade here. It's just trusting the volume, and last week, Robinson had 24 touches for 113 yards and a touchdown. He also got vultured by Jeremy McNichols twice on the goal line. McNichols scored 2 touchdowns last week. And if one of those does go to B-Rob this week, then this top 10 ranking is guaranteed to hit if he has 2 touchdowns. So as long as Eckler is out, Robinson is a true stud. Even if Eckler does come back, there's no way I'm benching Brian Robinson. I think there's too much value in this offense. They are humming, and they score a lot of points. I think Brian Robinson is top 10 with Eckler unavailable. I love Brian Robinson's value right now. Number 11, though, I have James Conner at San Francisco, and with the exception of Week 3 versus Detroit, Conner has been very safe this season. 17.5 touches per game and 13.9 fantasy points per game. He only had 3 in Week 3. So without it, it would look a lot better. And I'm not too worried about the 49ers matchup here. I think this game will be pretty competitive. And Staley's defense hasn't looked elite this year. They've allowed 4 running back touchdowns so far in San Francisco. So I do think Conner will find the end zone. They also give up 49 receiving yards per game to the position, and he could feast, have a very good stat line in the receiving game this week. But I'm a little bit worried, though, that he isn't seeing many targets this season. In the last 3 games, he has only 1 target in each of those games. He was a bit more involved in Week 1, but that's been capping his upside, but the floor is very secure, very safe, and last week he gave you 17 plus points. I definitely am trusting him. I expect the touchdowns to continue for James Conner. I'm not worried about Trey Benson at all. Number 12, though, I have Aaron Jones versus the Jets, and the volume remains elite for Aaron Jones. 20 touches per game this season, 4 catches per game as well, for a total 116 yards per game and 2 touchdowns this season. He is running for 5 yards per carry. However, despite a fumble a couple weeks ago, he looks fantastic overall this year. The offense is humming. I do worry about this matchup a little bit, though. The Jets rank bottom 7 for opposing running backs in fantasy, allowing only 16.6 points per game to the position. They give up yards, but only 1 touchdown on the year. So I'm not totally convinced that Jones finds the end zone this week. It's kind of a 50-50 call, and these games can be weird in London. Sometimes they're shootouts, but I'm less optimistic about that. I'm more convinced it's a lot of defense this week, given how both defenses have looked this season. So I think you still have to start Jones. He's definitely earned your trust. I love the floor, but I'm not totally convinced he finds the end zone. Without it, you're still probably getting 10 plus points. I think Jones has earned your trust. Number 13, I have Josh Jacobs at the Rams, and this matchup does rank top 6. You are excited about it. The Rams just gave up 119 rushing yards to the Bears after they did nothing all year before that. So very good spot here. The Rams allow 26.1 points per game to the position, 131 yards on the ground per game, 34 receiving yards per game as well, and 5 running back touchdowns. That is what you hope to see in a matchup like this, because Jacobs has been fine this year. The floor has been excellent. If you look at the volume and yardage, you're definitely starting him. 19.5 touches per game for 95 total yards per game, but he only catches 1.8 reception per game. I think it will be increasing now that Jordan Love is back at quarterback. However, through 4 games, he has not found the end zone once, and that inevitably will happen, but until it does, you can't feel like elite about his upside, but I'm still starting him no matter what. He has a 10-point floor until the touchdown happens, and if it does, you're getting 16 plus points immediately. So I love this matchup for Jacobs, but until the touchdown hits, I can't quite rank him top 10. At RB13, though, he is a high-end RB2. Number 14, I have Joe Mixon versus Buffalo, who is questionable day-to-day with his injury, but I think he plays. I'm not too worried about it. I think he was kind of close to playing in week 4. However, they saved him for this Bills matchup. I think that was wise. They beat Jacksonville without him. But on paper, this is a plus matchup. It ranks number 1. However, I do think it's just inflated by Derrick Henry last week. I'm not totally buying in to an elite upgrade against the Bills' run defense. They do allow 64 running back receiving yards per game, though, and that could be nice for Mixon in week 5 if he does start to catch a lot of passes. But I don't think he's going to see the full workload that we saw in week 1 when he had 30 touches. Now that he's coming off an injury, I still think he's their number 1 guy, but I see a bit more of a committee this week. But he's still a must start. This offense can score at will, and he did average 15.9 points per game the first 2 weeks when he was active. But that did include a bad week in week 2. He had only 6.5 points. He's a bit touchdown dependent, but odds are it does hit. The running backs in Houston have been scoring while he's been out. So I do trust him at RB14. I do think you're starting Joe Mixon this week. At number 15, though, I think this is a gut call, but I think after last week, I am upgrading DeAndre Swift versus Carolina. The upside is there. I don't know if he'll look as good as last week, but this is the type of matchup that you want to chase. In my opinion, I think it is the most legit matchup stats among the top 5 that I am buying into. Carolina's defense currently ranks number 2, allowing 28.6 points per game to running backs so far this season, 126 rushing yards per game, 32 receiving yards per game to the position, and 7 running back touchdowns. And they haven't really faced any like truly elite run games other than the Chargers. So I think I am totally buying in. Last year it was a good matchup as well, and I think their defense is bad. I think any running back against the Panthers gets an upgrade. So that's why I rank him top 15 here. I think after last week you were encouraged, and with all the players out due to injury or the bye, he definitely moves up as well. So Swift was awful in the first 3 games. I understand there is a lot of risk here, but Chicago did figure out the run game in week 4, and I think they should be building on that momentum in week 5. His usage in the passing game also gives him a very high ceiling. After last week, you're willing to trust him. 23 total touches for 165 total yards. He also caught all 7 targets, and the touchdown I do think hits in a good matchup here. So I think Swift is legit. I do think in good matchups you want to start him, and with all the circumstances pointing in his direction this week, I think he is a top 20 play. I rank him at number 15 because the upside is undeniable. Number 16, I have DeVon Achane at New England, and I am kind of hitting the panic button on Achane. But with all the unavailable running backs, I think you have to keep rolling him out there. The Patriots have also allowed a rushing touchdown in every game this season. So I think Achane scores, but I'm really not excited with what he's done in the last 2 weeks without Tua. This offense is horrible, and I actually think they might lose this game in Foxborough. I think they are on upset watch in this one. The first 2 games, Achane was great, averaging 22.8 points per game. The last 2 weeks, though, he's only averaging 5.9 points per game on only 2.1 yards per carry. So pretty atrocious. Does have the ability to completely lose your week. However, I still trust the volume, and the matchup is somewhat okay. He didn't even have 30 yards against the Titans last week, though, so I get it if you think I'm too high. I'm hopeful he bounces back, but yuck, there is no floor here, and it's completely reliant on a touchdown to exceed 10 points. But I do think it happens. That is why I'm still ranking him top 20. However, I understand if you want to bench him. The position's just so depleted this week. I don't think you can. Same applies with Rhamondre Stevenson. Very ugly the last 2 games. However, against Miami, I rank him here at 17 because it is a top 4 matchup for the running back position this year. They allow 27.3 points per game to running backs. The Dolphins defense does. 113 yards per game on the ground, 25 receiving yards per game, and also 8 touchdowns to the position. So the odds that he scores are very high. I actually believe this is a good matchup because their opponents have not been super legit so far this year. So I think they could actually win this game, and Rhamondre has a couple good games when they are competitive. The volume should be there this week. I do think he sees 20 plus touches, and that does open the door for some upside here. So the matchup suggests he is very, very likely to hit on a touchdown, and that's why I do rank him top 20. I know you're discouraged with the last 2 games, but I think you're rolling him back out there. I think he is top 20 in a good matchup against the Dolphins. Number 18, though, I'm worried about Travis Etienne versus the Colts because Tank Bigsby has been far more efficient than him this season. However, Etienne is still, from a workload standpoint, their RB1. However, it isn't leading to a lot of touches. He is maxed out at 13 rush attempts in any game this year, and he has 2 straight with only 11. And although he has ran for 4.6 yards per carry, he is efficient. It has not been great for fantasy, only 10.3 points per game this year, and that includes 2 touchdowns as well. So without a touchdown, you will not get 10 points. You're barely getting 7.5, and I'd be very worried about Etienne rest of season, as Bigsby will probably start to get more involved as the weeks go by. The Colts run defense has been good the last 2 weeks. It is no longer a good matchup for fantasy, only giving up 63 rushing yards per game to opposing running backs, and only 1 running back touchdown on the season to Joe Mixon in week 1. They are no longer an elite matchup on paper. So I'm worried about Etienne. I do think they win this game, though, and I do think he might sneak into the end zone. That is the only saving grace with Etienne right now. But number 19, I have Najee Harris versus Dallas, and technically this is an excellent matchup, the number 3 so far this season, but if you remove the Alvin Kamara and Derrick Henry games, then they only give up 41 rushing yards per game to running backs like Devin Singletary and Jerome Ford. So really it's not ideal. If you include Kamara and Henry, then it is a good matchup, 104 yards per game on the ground and 7 touchdowns on the season, but I really don't believe that it's that big of an upgrade. I think it's actually more of a downgrade than a +1, but Najee has not scored a single touchdown on the year. That really caps his upside, and even without Jalen Warren or Cordero Patterson, he failed to see 20 touches in week 4. Justin Fields did run it quite a bit more, and he kind of saved you with 54 receiving yards last week. But without a touchdown, Najee Harris is strictly a floor play, and you're just trying to bank 8 or 9 points and avoid a bagel. So I don't see very much upside for him at all this year. I think you're really just praying for a touchdown that probably does not happen. And Patterson honestly looked better than him before going down with injury. So I'm not excited about Najee, but I think because of the volume, because of the situation with his backups hurt, I think you have to rank him top 20. I think you have to keep trusting the volume, but without a touchdown, you're just never getting the ceiling. It's pretty disappointing. So I understand if you actually want to bench him for some of the players I rank lower, but the volume is just too safe. Nobody after this point is going to see the same amount of touches as Najee this week. But you know who I think will get a decent workload is Kareem Hunt of the Chiefs this week against the Saints on Monday night. There is a slight chance that Clyde Edwards-Helaire could come back off IR. However, that would just muddy this running back room even further and make it more crowded. But at least Carson Steele clearly lost his job once he fumbled last week. Kareem Hunt was definitely their main guy, and he did get vultured by Samaje Perine for a touchdown. So I do think he'll get more touchdown opportunity in the future, especially with Rashee Rice going down. This offense has very few weapons. So Kareem Hunt is now probably the leading candidate in the Chiefs offense to find the end zone. And if the 16 touches he got in week 4 is his floor, then you have a legit flex play in your lineup every single week. I do not fear this matchup. So I think Hunt is a legit start this week and moving forward until Pacheco comes back. Number 21, though, I have Devin Singletary at Seattle here, and he looked terrible against Dallas on Thursday, which was surprising. They were an excellent matchup entering that game, but he did get shut down, and I'm a bit worried it could happen again here against Seattle. Their top 4 defensive linemen were out against Detroit, so if they're healthy, they will look more formidable on defense, but I'm going to trust the usage for Singletary that he was getting the first 3 weeks one more time. I think last week was a little bit just game script and matchup dependent. I don't know if he'll be atrocious every single week, but I wasn't a huge believer in him entering the season. I think it's just a floor play type of spot for him. The position is just missing so many players. I think that's the only reason he does crack the top 25. But if you get another 17 touches again from him with 3 or 4 catches like he was getting the first 3 games, then it's very hard to find a safer floor ranked lower in these ranks. So I do still think the floor is okay. If he does find the end zone again, he'll be pretty good for double digits. Seattle has allowed 4 running back touchdowns this year. The odds of one hitting for Singletary are decent. However, if you look a little closer, 3 of them came last week against Detroit. So not expecting multiple touchdowns, but his odds to score are about 50-50. I think Singletary is decent because of the volume you expect for him. But these next 2 guys I think have higher upside. I got Zach Moss and Chase Brown versus Baltimore. I wanted to rank them higher. I would have ranked them top 17, honestly, if not for this matchup. The Ravens are a bottom 3 running back matchup in fantasy, allowing only 14.4 points per game to the position, 42 rushing yards per game, 37 receiving yards per game. If the running backs can't even put up 80 yards combined against Baltimore, you're not going to be excited about the upside with these players. They become very touchdown dependent. The Ravens have only allowed 2.7 yards per carry this year. They have given up 2 touchdowns though, so that's the saving grace. However, at this point, I'm not totally sure who is the guy on the goal line that you trust more, because last week they both saw 15 carries while Moss had a couple more catches. It was essentially 50-50 in terms of the touch split, and that's probably going to continue for a while. I don't think one of them will overwhelmingly overtake the other. I think you need an injury in this backfield to know that you're getting like the alpha workhorse. And until that happens, I don't think it's like a clear bet who will have the better game. So that's why I rank them back to back. It's a bit of a hedge. One of them could go off, one could burn you. However, the matchup indicates both should be downgraded. So I'm a little bit worried. I think they're just flex plays this week. I know last week was very encouraging. The ceiling is definitely there, but I doubt this game turns into a shootout. I think in division, it could be more of a close battle, and you might not see any touchdowns at all from either player. So good luck. If it wasn't for the matchup, I think I'd be way more trusting of these 2 players in my lineup. They look pretty good, but the Ravens defense looks better. Number 24 and 25, though, another pair of teammates. I have Bucky Irving and Rachaad White back-to-back at Atlanta, and I do prefer Bucky Irving. Both running backs had 10 rush attempts for 49 yards in week 4, but Irving scored a touchdown. Meanwhile, Rachaad White had only 1 extra target, and just like the Bengals backfield, this looks like a true 50-50 split between both players. The touchdown could go to either guy as well, and that's what makes them a little bit risky to fully bet on. But the momentum is clearly moving in favor of Bucky Irving, so I do rank him 1 spot above. He's definitely more efficient on the ground. Rachaad White cannot get anything going in terms of rush attempts. So not excited with Rashaad's ceiling, but in PPR, he does offer a bit more pass catching work and a bit more ceiling. I just think you're really pissed if you drafted him. The trends are terrible for his season long outlook. What is it going to look like a month from now? So really worried about Rachaad, but at the moment, I do think the 2 of them are on equal footing. I would rather have Bucky Irving rest of season. Number 26, though, is a player who I think is a must pick up off the waiver wire. And if I knew for a fact he was the RB1 in this backfield, I might rank him top 15, because this could turn into a Zach Moss situation like we saw last year, where we get a top 15 running back every week with 20 plus touches filling in for Taylor. It could also burn you, though, if I'm wrong about Evan Hull or Tyler Goodson. They might have more of a role, and it could be a true 3-player committee. But for the moment, I do trust Trey Sermon the most. He did fill in for Taylor last season, and I do think he's the running back to own in this group. The matchup is also pretty good. It's top 7. The Jags defense is allowing 24.4 points per game to the position, 81 yards per game on the ground, and 57 receiving yards per game as well. They've also given up 5 touchdowns to running backs. So like the matchup a lot, I do think there's some breakout potential here for Trey Sermon. If he finished the week top 15, I wouldn't be that shocked, to be honest with you. So I would be trying to pick him up if you do need some depth at running back. I do think he's a very interesting flyer this week. I do think he has legit flex appeal with Taylor expected to miss. Number 27, though, I have Jerome Ford at Washington, and the Commanders have allowed 5.4 yards per carry for 122 rushing yards per game this season. They also have given up a rushing touchdown in 3 straight games as well, and they are a good matchup on paper. But I really have no idea what to expect from the running back usage in the Browns' backfield. Ford is playing well, averaging 5.2 yards per carry, but he only has 1 touchdown on the season and only 14 touches per game. He has 7 targets in 2 different games this year, but less than 30 yards receiving in each of those games as well. So volume in the passing game doesn't always equate to high production. This team is very weird. I do not trust the offense to score many touchdowns, and it really caps Ford's upside in general to play with Watson. So there's a legit chance that he burns you, especially if Nick Chubb comes back this week. Then Ford is really not safe, and that would completely crater any of his value, most likely. So I will pass on him this week, despite a plus matchup. I just don't trust Ford's safety net. It's really non-existent. Number 28, though, I have Rico Dowdle at Pittsburgh, and this is the second worst matchup you could ask for running backs. The Steelers allow only 13.6 points per game to running backs this season, 69 yards per game on the ground, 31 receiving yards per game, and only 1 running back touchdown through 4 weeks. So Dowdle is very unlikely to score a touchdown. He's also only averaging about 12 touches per game the last 3 weeks. And despite being the RB1 in Dallas, it is a 3-player committee with Zeke and Hunter Luepke also involved. So he does get the touches you want, but if he doesn't luckily find the end zone, he is a major risk, probably good for about 7 points max. And I can't imagine him getting 15 plus unless he somehow scores twice, and this is not the matchup to bet on that happening. So very touchdown dependent. I'm benching Rico Dowdle if I can this week, but if you can't, if you're desperate, good luck to you. Number 29, I got Javonte Williams versus Las Vegas, and Tyler Beatty's injury kind of spares some value for Javonte right here, but I have no confidence in starting him this week. He only looked okay versus the Jets with 18 touches for 80 yards, but before that, he was doing nothing, and he still has no touchdowns on the year. I really do not trust him to retain the job all season long. I do think he could get overtaken easily, especially if Estime comes back off IR and looks good. And it's not like this offense scores a lot of points every week either. So Las Vegas has been a top 10 matchup this year, but I just haven't seen enough from Javonte to trust him in my lineup. I was thinking about dropping him entirely entering last week, but I think after his performance, you're still holding on. You don't feel great about it, though. Javonte is a liability. Number 30, I have Alexander Mattison at Denver, and Zamir White finally gets the chance to prove why he's their RB1, and he puts up fewer yards than Mattison on more than 3 times the volume. Last week, Zamir was terrible. So you really have no confidence in Zamir. If anything, Mattison is probably going to steal his job. And so far, he's been stealing all the fantasy value as well. He gets all the valuable touches, all the catches, all of the touchdowns as well. And if I'm starting a Vegas running back, it is Mattison. I'm not even considering Zamir. I'm probably dropping Zamir, most likely. So definitely would rather start Mattison. But at this point, I think you're benching every running back moving forward. They're just not safe enough to trust. So I'll just rip through the next 10, the top 40. I'm not going to go 50 players deep this week. The position is so depleted. And I really think you're benching all of these players outside the top 25. It's very unlikely they sniff your lineup. But at this point, we're getting desperate, and you are looking for some backups. And I do think Braelon Allen is still involved. He's explosive enough to score a touchdown randomly, but the matchup is not great here against the Vikings. It's still Breece Hall's job, and you're hoping for the best. It probably won't work out against Minnesota. Number 32, though, I have Justice Hill at the Bengals, and Derrick Henry's 30 years old, so Hill is not going away, and he also has a very legit role in the passing game. I'm not convinced he scores touchdowns every week, but he does have 2 games this year with 6 catches, and that is something. It is valuable when it does happen, but not guaranteed to happen all the time. Still risky with Justice Hill. Zack Charbonnet, though, has a similar role in the Seahawks offense. This week he gets the Giants. It's a good matchup, and he is still catching passes in this backfield. There is a world where they bench the starters in a blowout win over New York as well, so maybe some 4th down volume is in line for Charbonnet. I doubt it, but he did catch 5 receptions last week, even while Walker was healthy all game. So there's a sliver of value with him. I wouldn't cut him, that's for sure. Number 34, I have Antonio Gibson versus Miami. Really random spike weeks for him, so it's possible he's good, but I don't trust him. Number 35, I have Tank Bigsby versus the Colts, and I'm not ready to rank him above Etienne, but he does have a role, and he is running for 8.2 yards per carry this season. You could do far worse than Bigsby, but he's more of just a bench stash right now. Who knows, though? He could be the next Bucky Irving. He might have a 50-50 split in this backfield very soon. He could take over in a month. Number 36, I got Ty Chandler versus the Jets, and it's clearly Aaron Jones' job, but Chandler gets involved a little bit. He doesn't catch many passes, and the matchup is not great, but a touchdown could happen randomly. I would roster Chandler as a handcuff to Jones. He does have a lot of contingent upside if Jones gets hurt. Number 37, though, I got Zamir White at Denver, and I think you can honestly drop him. I don't see his role getting better. I think last week was a prove-it game for him, and the fumble really buries the confidence they had entering the year. So I think you'd much rather have Alexander Mattison, but I get it if you're not totally ready to give up entirely. The volume still favors Zamir, but it hasn't translated to fantasy points. It is kind of worthless for Zamir. Number 38, though, I got Roschon Johnson versus Carolina, and he had kind of a cheap touchdown last week, but I do think it could hit again. He does have a decent role in this offense, and while Swift is clearly the RB1, Roschon is clearly the RB2, Khalil Herbert pretty irrelevant. Number 39, I got Jaleel McLaughlin versus Las Vegas, and I really don't know what you're getting from Denver running backs every single week. It's pretty random no matter what, and maybe he is better than Javonte this week, but he needs a touchdown in order to do that, and he could also give you 2 points if it doesn't hit. So I'm going to bench him. I'm not even really dying to roster him. I think Estime has some upside when he gets healthy, though. Number 40, I have Tyler Goodson at Jacksonville, and I could definitely be wrong about Trey Sermon. There is an interesting value here if he is the pass catcher. You might want to put him on the watch list, but I doubt it. I think it's all kind of just going to Sermon, at least the fantasy value, and I doubt there'll be a touchdown here for Goodson. So I am not going to show you the top 50 like I normally do. There are very few options, and nobody at this point is worth starting, so if they're ranked lower, don't even think about it. So here are the top 40 running backs here on the screen, and I feel excellent about the top 3, but there are some question marks regarding matchups or just production this season from everyone after that. However, I do think all the players through Joe Mixon, RB14, are locks in your lineup. If you have those guys, there is no chance in hell you are benching them, and you do have very legit upside. I would expect if the touchdown hits, you're getting 16 plus points from all of them, and it is very likely to happen for every player this week. So love guys like Chuba Hubbard this week, Bijan Robinson, James Conner, Aaron Jones, even Josh Jacobs in a good matchup. All very good plays this week. But once you hit RB15 with DeAndre Swift, now you are very concerned. You're just hoping for the best, and you're leaning into matchups. So that's why I got Swift ranked so high. I do think he's a legit start. I do think Kareem Hunt is a legit start. I'm a little worried about Achane, Rhamondre, Etienne, and Najee Harris, but the volume is probably too high to bench, and you're just hoping for touchdowns. I wish the matchup wasn't so bad for the Bengals running backs. I think they'd be very valuable this week if it wasn't against Baltimore, but I do worry about that matchup, and I think once you pass Trey Sermon with a guy like Jerome Ford, Rico Dowdle, that's really the cutoff point. You got to be kind of desperate in order to actually start them, but I'm in that situation in the subscriber league. I might have to start Rico Dowdle, and I do need some luck, but I think once you hit Justice Hill, Zack Charbonnet, probably Antonio Gibson, that is the last name I would even consider. I think everyone after that point is a true must bench, and you're just praying for a touchdown beyond the orange line in these ranks. So good luck to you. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section, and I will update these ranks when we get all of the injury reports on Saturday. So look out for that. Ring the notification bell, subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and I will see you in the next video. My name's Adam Riancho. Thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.